My name is Nihal Samara. I am the General Counsel and Legal Director of the law firm Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. There are a large number of agencies that are joining us today and from right around the country, and I thank you for your time. Our law firm has been running these COVID-safe legal compliance sessions since the start of the pandemic, since February last year. And it's important that agencies be aware of what their legal compliance obligations are and also keep up to date with all the different changing rules and regulations that are across the country. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. There are 4 sessions that we're going to be looking at over the next 4 weeks. The first session today's session is how to return to the workplace, and we're going to look at how to make it safe for staff and volunteers. And this includes actually taking apart, if I can use that word, some of the key questions that agencies have asked us. So that includes QR codes, that includes registers, that includes vaccine rollout, that includes, can I make it mandatory for staff or volunteers to be screened before they go and see clients? All of these types of things is what we're going to be looking at today. And it's going to be focused around the workplace. Equally, next week, we're going to look at how to run community events. As things continue to open, one of the challenges for charities and not-for-profit agencies is running community events. We've already seen that as places like RSLs leading in to Remembrance Day and the likes are looking at big community events. What does that actually look like? But for charities, equally, whether you're running a community event for 2 people or a large community event up to 2,000 people, what does that actually look like and how do you actually do that? That will include, also leading into week 3, that will include how to deliver services to clients. So if you're let's say a home nursing service or a community health center that actually needs to go and visit clients, what are the rules that you need to follow? How much COVID-safe compliance do you need to actually work through? We'll actually show you what other agencies have been doing since the start of the pandemic, how this has changed, how they ramp up, ramp down during lockdowns periods as well. And that leads into week 4, which is how to report internally and externally. And what we mean by that is bringing all your legal compliance obligations together and also making the relevant reports when you need to relevant government departments. So the next 4 weeks is going to be really a hands-on session. We're going to be looking at, as I mentioned today, returning to the workplace, looking at staffing and volunteer registers and the likes, also answering questions around vaccine rollouts, etc. Then we're going to look at the community events, which is the external works that most of you would be participating in, and some agencies we've worked with that actually deliver services into other states as well, and we'll use some very clear examples of that. And as we go through each of the next 4 weeks, more than happy to field questions during the webinar and also between our sessions as we go through this as well. So what we're going to be looking at as a high-level overview is this. We're going to be looking at office spaces, and also this can be replaced with, if you're a church, for example, or you're a religious group or volunteer services, we're going to be looking at using QR codes. What do those look like and how do those actually work? We're going to look at, well, where does that information go? While you might use different QR codes and the likes, I'll show you where you can get one from, and we've set this up for agencies so you can get these from us directly. But then where does that go? How does that actually work? And we'll actually step that through, and I'll actually share my mobile phone on screen and actually do this live with you as well too. Looking at the office space, a lot of questions that people then ask is record keeping. What's the rules around that? How long do we need to keep information for? What about floor markings? What information do I need to keep in lobbies? What about face masks? Do we need to encourage people to meet outdoors? All these types of things we'll actually be unpacking today and working through this. So with today's agenda, we're going to be looking at some of the rules, and there are different rules across Australia. For example, in Victoria, it moved to COVIDSafe summer restrictions back in Sunday, the 6th of December 2020. But then there were rolling lockdowns that occurred as well too. And the most recent updates again changed back in February. And then between February and March, there were further restrictions put in place as well. So you see that one of the things or the tools that the states are in fact using is rolling lockdowns to manage outbreaks very cautiously. So by attending this webinar, what you should be getting is a better understanding of the COVID rules. You should be able to implement these this afternoon. You should improve your awareness of the HR rules, particularly around staffing, volunteers, mandatory vaccinations, what you need to consider around those. And we will give you a timely set of resources that provide an overview of information that should be helpful to support your company, staff, and volunteers. With that, you'll also see what COVID-safe systems and activities other companies have been using as well too, and what they've actually been doing to support this process as well. And see 2 different case examples of what has worked and has continued to work as well. A few housekeeping items as well too. This webinar is being recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session. You can ask questions, and a few people have been doing that in the chat group already. And we will get to your questions as we go through today's session. This webinar is being published on our Gemba 360 YouTube channel. And also we do have a knowledge base that is also available on our website. And you can actually see that on our site. And just to go here, you can visit us on our KaizenSynergy.com website and also see us on the Gemba 360 YouTube channel. And you can watch all of our past videos that we have loaded onto here as well too. That said, just a brief introduction about our firm, our law firm as well too. Over the last 12 months, we have onboarded some 4,000 companies in the past year to support their COVID-safe plan. There are many new agencies that are joining us today, so just a couple of slides around this. With that, we do have sessions that we do run throughout the week. Equally, our Gemba 360 COVID-safe system was actually shown at the Dubai International Emergency Conference some 10 years ago and has been used in bushfires, natural disasters, floods, and the likes. And as part of our legal compliance system, we have also received awards from CIO Journal that have put us in the top 5 legal IT companies globally as well too. You'll find that our Gemba 360 system, which you all will have access to as well too, and you'll see that on our website here. You can log in here and you will get access to that today. And that essentially gives you your QR codes, that gives you your workplace compliance obligations, as well as all of your COVID daily assessment tools and contact tracing tools, which you can start to use today as well. So that said, it is also mobile friendly, and we've had one staff member field a call today from a arts service that said, look, we don't actually have any computers. We can't afford that. Well, you can actually access Gemba 360 COVID-safe system on your mobile device as well. And this has your QR codes to in fact use. So let's have a look at the legal compliance obligations and what the rules are. Essentially, last year, Scott Morrison announced that all workplaces need to develop a COVID-safe plan. So that shouldn't come as a surprise to you. Many of you should have those already in place. That said, there is still a bit of confusion around what a COVIDSafe plan actually looks like. Now, essentially, it should contain the legal compliance areas, so references to different Department of Health rules and laws, such as the Biosecurity Act, and also different omnibus legislations that have been announced as part of the pandemic, and also include directives from the Commonwealth, that you can see on the left-hand side, safe work checklist, and then your pandemic plan. For those of you that have accessed and jumped into the Gemba 360 COVIDSafe dashboard, you can see that if you click on the disaster module, it'll take you into the projects, and you've got essentially step 1, step 2, step 3, which is what Scott Morrison was talking about. And if you open one of these, it'll give you the steps to complete as part of your COVIDSafe plan, and it allows you to basically go through and mark and say you've actioned each of these items. And it gives you that central one-stop repository space so that your agency can access their COVIDSafe plan as well as their QR code contact tracing and screening all in one spot. Now, with the assessment tools I'll come to, which includes things like your daily assessment forms. So if you have volunteers, again, you've got that on your dashboard that you can access, and you've got the daily assessments that people can, in fact, mark off when they come to work as part of their daily screenings that they should be doing, just to say that they don't have any of the symptoms, or if they do, you've got a register of those and for them to stay home. Equally, if there is also the requirements for you to keep your COVIDSafe contact tracing registers using your QR codes, then you can actually click on this here and you've got your register of QR codes and attendance registers as well. Now, I will come back to that and show you how other agencies are using the Gemba 360 COVIDSafe dashboard to make it simpler and easier for them to keep up to date with all the rules and regulations. So let's have a look at what the current requirements are. And with it, their employers and employees are seeking clarity on their workplace rights and obligations as COVID-19 vaccinations becomes available in Australia. There are currently no laws or public health orders in Australia that specifically enable employers to require their employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The Australian government's policy, however, is that receiving a vaccination is voluntary, although it aims to have as many people vaccinated as possible. There are, however, limited circumstances where an employer may require their employees to be vaccinated. Now, what we suggest that employers do, and this is consistent with information taken from Fair Work, where there are no laws or public health orders that specifically enable employers to require their employees to be vaccinated. And I stress that again. There are relevant factors that an employer should consider as part of this requirement. One of those is the requirement laws. The other one is essentially around contract or enterprise agreements that you might have with staff. And if there is no law or employment contract that requires vaccination, whether it would be lawful and reasonable for an employer to give employees direction to be vaccinated. And that's actually really important, because this is where there's an overlap between public health legislation and occupational health and safety rules as well. Now, what we find under work safety rules is that there is this requirement for directors and officers, which most of you are, to ensure a safe work environment. Now, what does that mean? If essentially means that can you give directions to employees or volunteers to in fact be vaccinated? Now, if you go to Fair Work, what they say is employers should obtain their own legal advice, which is not really that useful. So we've been fielding a lot of questions from agencies saying, well, what circumstances can we direct employees to, in fact, be vaccinated. Now, there are some high-risk environments that have been identified by the state and Commonwealth governments. These include places like healthcare and community services, and also meat processing. So you can actually provide in some parts of the sector directives for this to occur. It also means that if there are summer contracts or agreements that do contain terms to vaccinations, then again, you may need to consider whether there's any anti-discrimination laws that you might fall foul of. And I'll come back to this as well. Now, as an employer, you can direct employees to be vaccinated if the direction is lawful and reasonable. Now, for a direction to be lawful, it needs to comply with a contract, award, or an agreement that applies. And there are a range of factors that may be relevant that we've had to work through with other agencies like yourselves. And these includes whether a direction is reasonable, whether it's practical. On its own, the coronavirus pandemic doesn't automatically make it reasonable for an employer to direct their employees to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. Employees interact with people with an elevated risk of being infected with coronavirus. For example, people working in hotel quarantine or border control is a really good example of that. Employees have close contact with people who are most vulnerable to the health impacts of coronavirus, and that includes also people working in healthcare or aged care sector as well too. With that, what happens then is the next question. If an employee refuses to be vaccinated, what happens then? Well, if an employee refuses to be vaccinated, then an employer should at the first step ask the employee to explain their reasons around this. And if the employee has provided a legitimate reason, that could be that there's an existing medical condition or the likes, then there may need to be other options that are made available as well too. Now, stand downs are unlikely to be available option for employers if an employee refuses direction to be vaccinated. And there are specific stand down requirements that need to be followed, and only these really apply in only certain circumstances as well. Now, the next question that comes out of it is then, can an employer require an employee to provide evidence that they have been vaccinated? So if an employer has provided a lawful and reasonable direction to be vaccinated, then you can actually direct an employee to provide the evidence that that has happened as well. So you can actually do that. But again, you need to have the process in place to actually do that. Now, if an employee refuses to be vaccinated, can an employer require evidence about why they've refused? Well, again, that is also reasonable as well. And you can actually seek a direction would be to get that information and understand it. Equally, you'd need to consider carefully around privacy issues, which may also come up as well too. Now, can an employee refuse to attend the workplace because a co-worker isn't vaccinated against the coronavirus? So you see how all of these workplace issues and requirements need to be adjusted within your agency, and not only adjusted, but addressed. So essentially, at present, there is no public health order preventing attendance. It is unlikely that an employee could refuse to attend their workplace where a co-worker isn't vaccinated against coronavirus, because the vaccination is not mandatory in most workplaces, and the co-worker may have a legitimate reason not to be vaccinated. For example, a medical reason may well be one of those. So if an employee refuses to attend the workplace because a co-worker isn't vaccinated, their employer can direct them to attend the workplace if the direction is lawful. Now, if an employer takes disciplinary action, if an employee refuses to get vaccinated, can this happen? Well, an employer may be able to take disciplinary action, including termination of employment against an employee for refusing to be vaccinated if the employee's refusal is in breach of a specific law or clear and repeated lawful and reasonable direction. So again, there are certain options that may well be available to you, but you need to carefully, as Fair Work says, carefully consider legal advice around this. Now, we have just got a question around this to say, thank you for all of answering these questions because they're really important. And a person has just raised the question, where do we, in fact, keep all of this information? Well, generally what we're finding is that agencies are, in fact, keeping their information under, if I bring this up, under their HR system. And essentially what we've got set up for you is in the Gemba dashboard, you'll find one of the things that we're finding a lot of people are having trouble on is where to keep even hard copy information. It's just not working well at the moment. So essentially what you can do is go in to your dashboard, and this is one of the sandboxes that we do have and agencies we've got permission to show around this, is that you have the ability to actually keep health information and COVID information in the HR module. In the your Gemba 360 dashboard, you can load in all of your volunteers. You can see here members and board members as part of this as well. And you have sections in here that enable you to set up and keep information directly about each staff member, and you can actually upload that information directly. You can give your staff access to this, and here it is here, and here it is here. We've already put one in as a loading file. Notice test, vaccination exemption received from staff member. And we've got the date and the time that it was actually entered. And it's as simple as doing that. People can then also add in their own emergency details as well too, and contact details, and it gives you a single source of truth and information to access your information. Keep in mind that other agencies, and when government departments have asked for it, have got their COVIDSafe plan located in the disaster system. They've got their contact tracing and QR codes located here under the contact tracing module, and they've got their HR system. And you've got access to all of these codes to view these as well. Now, essentially, what is important around keeping that documents is, well, what we've suggested is to keep it for the life of the pandemic, because you will need this information from a WorkSafe point of view. You will need it from an IR, industrial relations, and HR point of view as well too. It's not just simply from a public health response at the moment. So one of the things that you'll also find that how does a vaccination requirement interact with anti-discrimination laws? Well, essentially it's this. There are protected characteristics that you cannot discriminate against people that include people that are have a disability, pregnant, or due to their religious beliefs. So requesting or requiring employees to be vaccinated needs to meet all of these requirements, and you do need to consider whether your volunteers or staff actually meet any one of these requirements as well. And that may well be actually asking them those questions. Equally, can an employer require a prospective employee to be vaccinated before starting work? Now, in most circumstances, an employer may be able to require a prospective employee to be vaccinated. And sometimes screening questions have already been set up, we can see, that actually require this to occur. So employers should first consider their obligations and responsibilities carefully, for example, under general protections or anti-discrimination laws before doing so. So essentially the current restrictions, that covers off the workplace rules and requirements. The current restrictions that we're seeing in place around it means, and we're going back to that picture that I started the session on, you need to look at your COVIDSafe plan, and I'll send you all of these materials this afternoon for you to review. There are capacity requirements in terms of floor space, and these have been summarized. There are record keeping requirements whereby employers must keep a record of all workers and visitors who attend the workplace for longer than 15 minutes. That includes their first name, contact number, date and time of visit, and areas of the workplace visited. And employers are strongly recommended to use the electronic record keeping system for this purpose. Now, let me jump into this and show you how this works. So essentially what we do have, and I'll come back to this particular slide around this, is the need for people to meet their core and key requirements. And you can do this with us. Now, jumping through this particular slide around this, and you can do this with me right now. What we do have is, if you do have your mobile phone available, you can actually try this with me, and I'll show you this of how this works. So we have Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative, and we thank Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer out there, and also Women's Housing Limited, Judy Line, the Chief Executive Officer, who has given us permission to share this information with you as well. Now, what we see is this, and if you have a phone, you can try this with me. So essentially, QR codes is one of the big areas that people have had trouble with. Essentially, they work in the way to try and keep people safe as an electronic register. Essentially, what we have is this. You will find on your Gemba dashboard a QR code that you can use, and I'll show you where that is. In the disaster module, if you go into your projects, we have set this up and we're a provider of this, so you can use this essential QR code itself. You'll find it under the documents section, and it's actually called QR code, and you'll see it for your agency listed here. You can click on it and it will open it up for you. Now, the way this works is like this. You might already have the registers that you see in front of you. And what we have on this is this. It effectively can replace the registers that you see. And what it does is bring up the information that you need people to complete. And it works like this. And I'll show this to you on the live system. Now, by all means, you can do this with me as well too. And I encourage you, if you have your mobile phone, to pull this out and actually try it as well too. So here we go. With it, I'll slide my mobile phone in front of us here. And you can see this is really my phone. It's my kids in front of you here as well too. They've participated in all of these COVID-safe webinars that you can see here. Now, what we then do is this. We slide it open and we can go to the camera part of on your phone. You hold it up to the QR code, and essentially what comes up, and this is a test form here, and we're going to answer these questions here. And I'll just make this now slightly bigger for us to be able to see. And this is all being done live, and as I said, you can do this with me. In this case, we answer the question, and I'm going to put my mobile phone number in here. What we have done is then bundle all the questions together. So do you have any of the following? And the reason that we bundled all of these questions together is so that way it makes it easier for people to actually see and to complete the form itself. Because if they answer yes to one of these, then they need to notify you, which is what we're talking about here. And we say, yes, please do not enter the property. See the QR code for sheet for information. And so what Women's Housing have done just on this, you'll see the piece of paper down the bottom side of the screen on this webinar. And it actually says, if you answer yes to please contact, and it gives a specific number. Reason for visiting property, I'm just going to say webinar test event. Okay. You can complete this, no, and I click submit. Now, we've had a message that's located here that says, thank you for doing your part to keep everybody safe. Regards, Lindy Parker, the operations manager at Women's Housing. Now, where does that in fact go? Now, what happens is that once you complete this form, what we've found with other department systems is that it goes off into the ether and you can't actually see this information. Whereas what we have here, and I can see now if I share my screen back again with you again, then we've actually had a number of responses that have equally come through. And we can then go back and actually have a look at these individual data sets. And we can actually see who's actually answered these questions as well too. And we've had a number of people today that have actually answered these. Equally, from your point from here, what you then also have is this screen here, where you can actually have a look further at your contact tracing, and it flows directly into your Gemba 360 dashboard. And we've got this information listed here. Now, this is an example of one that we actually completed a few days ago. And you've got this information, the date and time that they've actually lodged it from, which device and where they're located. Now, this is the contact tracing information that is actually really super critical to your agency. And it means then that when we've done this with other systems and the likes, and some of this is included the department system, it means we didn't get this information. It effectively goes into the department area, but you as directors and officers of the company don't actually see the information, and you can't check to make sure that your staff or volunteers are actually doing it. So as part of this, what agencies have asked, and we see this constantly from the department, is what are the other obligations that you need to consider as part of returning to the workplace? One of those includes what they call daily attestations. And that's just really a fancy name to saying that staff that are delivering essential and critical services for your agency must complete daily forms to actually say that they actually are COVID safe. So where do we actually find that here on your dashboard? Well, on your dashboard, what you do have is what we've called the COVID daily assessment form. And this essentially is what's required by the department as the daily attestation. And you can click on this and staff can actually go in. I'm just logged in as Damien Aiden, who's the CEO of the Balranald Local Aboriginal Land Council, as an example. And I'm logged in on this date and at this time. Equally, for those agencies joining us from WA and the Northern Territory, when you log in, it'll have your own timestamp on here as well too. And with it, so it's local to where your staff or volunteers are actually based. We also do work with other agencies, religious agencies right around the country, and they'll have different timestamps that people will log in different time zones. What is required as part of this daily attestation for employees is that you actually mark in some of the questions that they've had. So do they have any of the symptoms? Equally, if there are, in this case, we've just used any outbreak locations that have been identified, have they visited them in the last 14 days? And again, you've got that information here. Now, we've got agencies as examples of that, and a really good example of that is Rumbalara Aboriginal Cooperative. Does actually have footprints left behind all the way through to the start of this pandemic. So they can actually trace back where staff have been, what they've done, where they've gone as part of that process, and asking staff to complete this voluntary. They're an agency of about 200 or 300 odd staff, but they use exactly the same system. Damien Aiden, the CEO of Balranald Aboriginal Land Council, is a smaller agency, but equally they have the same compliance obligations that big agencies have. So what they've got is a single QR code that they've got from their disaster management module, and you can see it here, it's listed here, and they use that automatically, and they put that out for all of their meetings, their board of director meetings. They have a single QR code that they use, and essentially that then puts all of their COVID tracing information back into here for Damien to actually view and see. So with it, you can see that from this part, you've got your HR management, you've got your COVIDSafe plans, you've got your notices that of what has been done by staff, as well as your contact tracing and QR codes that staff are expected to know and follow. Equally, there are some times when you will still continue to use your registers as well too, and you'll find that sometimes this works especially for people that have challenges using mobile devices as well. So as part of this, we have covered off the real life case studies. It's important that you look at the forms that you need to use in terms of COVID safety, working from home, cleaning registers as well too, which we will continue to look at next week as well too. And we'll go into the board reporting and governance reporting as well too. What we do find around this as well is as we work through this over the next few weeks is the different requirements that your agency needs to follow. So things like pandemic plans, your policies and templates that will also supply to you as well too. And this is an example of some of these coming up. And again, this will include working from home and travel restrictions policies as well. It's important that you utilize all of your volunteers and staff in your COVIDSafe and your return to workplace. We've seen this with women's housing where they've done exactly the same thing. You will get access to your QR codes to be able to use from your own system, and you'll get access to those today. Your COVIDSafe dashboard includes all of the resources that you do that I've spoken about today. With it, we will send you these login details for you to use as well, and we'll send you copies of all of the slides and webinar information that we've covered off. If you do have any questions, by all means, happy to stay on the line and answer these as we go through it. Equally, if you are listening to this recording after today's session, after today's live session, and you're listening to the recording on our YouTube channel, then please reach out to us on 1300 360 360 or email us at support@gemba360.com.